On today's podcast, we sit down with veteran artist manager Rob McDermott. Rob was one of the original managers of Linkin Park, and he tells that story on how the act was built, growing their career, what it's like to manage an artist in today's market, what are the challenges, what you need to be doing in terms of before you take on a client, how you need to have a solid plan, understanding the culture of your artist audience, and much, much more. It's really a great conversation that you don't want to miss. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sat down with veteran artist manager Rob McDermott to discuss managing artists in today's music landscape. When does an artist need a manager? The importance of having a solid plan before you take on a client, understanding the culture of your artist's audience, and much, much more. You don't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured interview is with manager extraordinaire Rob McDermott. Many of you may know him as the manager of Linkin Park. He managed them for a very, very long time, and he's been in the music business for many, many years. We had a great conversation, not only about, Linkin Park, but about the whole artist management, scenario, the whole element of, what is artist management today? How do you deal with clients? Understanding the culture of the artist's audience that you're dealing with and how important that is. How do you deal with a situation when a client leaves? And one of the more interesting things I thought was the specific qualities that he thought made a great manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the points that I really liked about this interview was when he takes on a new client, is it really important to have a solid plan behind it, which to me is critical. Also, we talked about the case study of Linkin Park and how that developed, because he was with them early on and breaking that act. So to see that metamorphosis, because that was a huge album and a huge breaking act. Also, I thought the interesting things were the distinctions between breaking a pop act versus a rock band versus an urban act. And one of my final areas that I thought was of interest was the importance of colleges and festivals and building an artist career with those.
Absolutely, those are crucial, especially in the early stages. And he talked a lot about that with Linkin Park. I mean, we forget it's been 20 years almost, but Linkin Park was one of the very first diamond, meaning beyond 10 million sellers, one of the only in the decade, the 2000 to 2010.
And they're one of the last that were from the old model. I think Hybrid Theory came out in 99, if I'm not mistaken. So that was right before they were on the cusp of that transition when Napster hit and everything went to shit with, the whole copy model. So it was just interesting because they're one of those last acts that were selling tons and tons of records.
Yeah, they did. They sold over 10 million copies of Hybrid Theory. And, which even for at that time, and they had that massive hit single in the end, which really, just connected in a way that, and for a debut act. And the interesting thing about them is that, I had known about that act long before they ever became Linkin Park, because a friend of mine, Jeff Blue,
yeah.
had wanted to sign them for years and couldn't get it done. He was a very, very renowned music publisher.
And he was a big advocate for the band.
He was a huge advocate. And when he got the opportunity to go to Warner Brothers as an A&R executive, he said, under one condition, that you allow me to sign this act. And they did, and he was right. But it was his faith and his belief over such a long period of time when he couldn't get them signed, as this, they were called hybrid theory at the time, that led them to their success. It's like staying with it until it happens. It didn't happen for several years.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. And then, Rob, of course, got involved, and the rest, as they say, is history. But
yeah.
That was a real case of somebody having the faith, like you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And staying with it.
So insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured interview with Rob McDermott.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm excited to do this.
Rob, you've been managing artists for a long time, and I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the most significant change in the nature of the manager and artist relationship today versus previous eras?
It sounds weird to say. I'm not sure it's kind of changed much. I think if you really have a great relationship, the thing that's different is you're more in it together. Because for a lot of young artists, you're doing it yourself early on, way more than we used to. 10, 15 or so years ago, you were able to showcase a band, get it signed, and you had help. Now you're going through that process for way longer than you would in the past.
At what point does a new artist need professional management? What's that critical point?
It's different with each kind. I try to tell an artist that, taking your parents and your best friends out of it, you need to have a good amount of followers somehow, some way, through any kind of social, any kind of group of people that can give you feedback that isn't so close to you. I try to tell my artists that you need 20,000 of something. Like, if you don't have that, then you don't have a good base for which someone else can help move you forward. And if an artist can't get themselves there, then they may have even a bigger problem with their ability to communicate to an audience.
When you look at the business today, so much of what you're talking about seems to be what the expectation is, that it's not only about social media, but it's also about other elements too. Live performance, social, moving product, selling tickets. I mean, it seems like people have to be developed more today than in the past. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but you know what? But it still comes from the place of creating art, right? You just have to know how to do a lot more with it. Like, to me, an artist now involves some sort of social media savvy, right? Artists were able to just kind of create and then find those avenues that were kind of established to get it out there. Now there's so many different avenues that you create the art and then you get out there and you have to kind of market it yourself. You end up being a bit more of a marketing artist. And I think that goes for anyone, even the ones that take off quite instantaneously. You still have to have that knack, again, of talking. You can find an audience, but how do you talk to them? How do you communicate to them?
Well, that brings up an interesting point. I mean, when you take on a new client, how important is it to really have a solid plan as to what you want to do with them?
Oh, yeah, you have to do that. I mean, listen, I've gone through in my career, I've gone through every which way with it. I've kind of hit the ground running. I've kind of just winged it. But mostly you gotta have some kind of semblance of a conversation and a plan. You have to really map out, because what happens is, and I don't blame them, artists want instantaneous, right? Oh, okay, I got to get this. I just created this song. I got to get it out. And I really try to caution them on, hold on a second. What are we doing 8-9 weeks after? Because is it getting another song out, or are you actually working on something else? Like, what are we communicating? What are we talking to people? Because just like we're talking right now, an artist has to be able to do that with their fans. They have to be able to say, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Guess what? I'm playing in your town next week. Or, hey, check out this new thing that I have right now. And you have to really be able to have that nice, open, honest conversation with an audience.
Do managers have to understand culture of your artist audience to be effective in helping to break them?
It's an interesting one for me because, I've always been kind of known as a hard rock guy for a long time, and I like to dabble in other audiences. You do need a little bit of semblance of understanding the overall concept of what it is. and at least knowledge base, especially as a manager, knowledge base of who makes things move in that world. And usually it's usually the same group of people or people that you've known from something else, like I joke around with a lot of people that it's interesting that all the rock people that I've known for the last 20 years, there's a handful of them that are now kind of helping out and running country in Nashville. You know what I mean? Stuff like that is like, so it moves around. Everyone moves around, right? The good ones, the great people who can kind of adapt, move around to different things and run different aspects of different genres. And so, but you really do need to have a basic understanding, or that you can communicate. Again, it goes back to communication, talking to your artist and talking to, how do you get this done? Okay, I came from the rock world, but I see that you need to use this, and this in your world. And this is what I think we should be doing and who we should be talking to. And that's what you have to be able to kind of work off of the basics of.
As I listen to you, one of the things that has just sort of come about or come to my consciousness in listening to you is the fact that so much of this revolves around communication with an artist, communication between you and the artist, between having a plan and developing it and executing it. And so, I mean, based on that, I'm curious, from your point of view, can you talk about, beyond the creative talent? I mean, of course, you have to love an artist's music and believe in it. But I'm curious, can you speak to what are the personal qualities, especially the non-creative ones, that you look for in clients that you're willing to take on?
It's so, this is where it sounds so odd to say it, but, I've had very cut off artists. I've had very empathetic artists. I've had all different kinds. If we can find solid ground together, and that audience really can grab to that artist, then we're all kind of in it. I've had artists that have said to me, "Hey, I want to keep you at arm's length. You're my business guy." Or I've had artists who said, "Hey, I need you by my side."
Right.
So it really does differentiate between what their potential needs are and what you believe their needs should be, and again, if it matches, there have been many artists that, well, not many, but there's been artists where I get into it and then all of a sudden we realize we don't get along.
Okay.
And then you gotta kind of figure out how that relationship works. And I have in the past for certain things, or you just kind of walk away from it and you say, this just doesn't work. We should just leave it now and stay friends, or we should leave it now and stay good acquaintances in this business. You've got to really be able to adapt to the personalities of the people that you're managing. Is probably the personal traits that I'm looking for, is just adaptability. I'm trying to talk myself through it, because for me as a manager, I just get in there and I do it. And if I talk to someone and I get into it and we hit it off, and sometimes we're talking about, cars, or I'm an aviation buff and space buff, and I can find artists that love that stuff, and we get into that and we go do different things together. Or I don't even really talk to my artists more than just business.
Right. I guess what I meant from that point of view is that I'm sure, and you don't have to name names, but I'm sure in your career you have come across artists whose music is just, it blows your mind. You absolutely love it. But for whatever reason, you say, this is not for me. This situation or this person or this artist this is just not for me. And, usually I find most managers have very specific criteria of the kinds of qualities that they're looking for in people. I remember Andy Gould, who you know very well, said...
Oh, yeah, my mentor.
Yeah, Andy once said the great classic line. He said, I look for people who want it more than I do. When you find that an artist, that you want it more than the artist does, that it matters to you more than the artist, run.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but that's that whole thing. When it becomes a toxic environment, right? If there's too much drama, you have to determine also what level of drama you're willing to accept. Because listen, a lot of it carries it. Most of it doesn't. Like, thank God. Like, you find nowadays a lot less drama now than there used to be. But there still is a good chunk of it in different genres. And you just got to kind of learn whether you're the type of person that wants to roll with it, where you're the person that can kind of get in it and do that. For me personally, I'm willing to walk away from money if it doesn't fit. I don't believe that. I believe that if you create great art, but you're a total idiot and a jerk, I don't want, there's another artist that wants to help, So I don't hold against that. I don't hold it against them. and I don't put them through something where I'm going to be not liking talking to the person who I'm in charge of building their art, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, Rob. I mean, and I know you're big in the rock world. I mean, that's kind of where you cut your teeth with. And I know you had a lot to do with Linkin Park and the whole story behind that. And I'm wondering if you could take our listeners kind of through like a case study of how that whole thing transpired and developed.
You know, it was really, I mean, I don't know how far back you want me to go. I got involved right before they recorded Hybrid Theory. There was a gentleman by the name of Jeff Blue who was very instrumental. No one wanted the band. No one wanted to deal with the band. You know, everyone thought the band stunk. Jeff kept the fight alive. You know, when he finally took a job at Warner, so just kind of short that, he brought them along with him. So they never really ever got signed per se. You know, in the classic sense. You know,
They had a champion who believed in them.
Yeah, they had a champion, and that's really kind of, by the way, that's the theme that's always gone through my life. Whether I've had, you know, Static X or being the assistant in the zombie world and Pantera, and watching these bands get kind of slighted at their time, and then find these champions that push things through. You know, that's really, you know, to me, I've been very lucky to have that. But with Lincoln, when I got, you know, I met with them and Jeff and Chester somewhere like months before I think it was like October '99, and then finally February 2000, I got the call. And so we got in there, and as we were making the record, you know, you knew it was something special. I heard the demos were pretty close. Mike Shinoda, being the genius that he is for that band, had pretty much taken most of those songs where they needed to go. And so all we were doing was, we were like, okay, we have to build an audience, you know? So we were finding, and the band were really good at this. They were building up a little fan base of their own, right? We were, you know, back then cassette samplers were still a thing. We were making sure that any kid that wanted to hear whatever demos we had or whatever mixes, that they were able to hear them. So, you know, Warner understood that we wanted to kind of use the street team model that was very popular back then in 99, 2000, and really, really push it through. And, you know, if I probably honestly think that there were probably 70 or 80,000 cassette samplers on the street by the end of 2000. Like, Warner was really, really there for the band. And in terms of understanding, not a lot of people just kind of didn't know they liked the music. They were thinking of them as a third-rate rap rock band, right? There was a lot of people that just didn't really hear it the way that the fans did. And that's okay. Industry people are totally like that. You know, this is a band that didn't even sneeze at that because they were ignored for so long, right? They were told they weren't right.
But it was such a breakout success right out of the gate.
You know, again, you know, the radio team played it at a convention, and all of a sudden, you know, people were clamoring to hear One Step Closer. And here we are going, you know what, we've done a good job. We've got 200-300 quote unquote street teamers that are helping us and pushing more music out. And, you know, we're hiring a company, Streetwise, which was owned by a System of a Down's manager, Dave Bino Benveniste. And, you know, we had all this little team. It was like this little village of people that were just kind of working all these bands, moving things forward. And, you know, it really, the community that was around rock bands around that time, really everyone helping each other out with tours, everyone doing things, people having their own little street team companies, which were just, you know, pre-internet, where it was easy just to kind of get word out, but you were physically handing stuff. You were doing, you know, hand to hand, as I would say. And that was really important for that moment. Obviously everything changes now, but to me, when radio was starting to all of a sudden take off, we sat down and we just said, you know what, radio's going to be whatever it's going to be. We can't control it. We're going to double down on making these fans feel great. How do we do that? You know, and this is all while we're recording a record. All of a sudden I'm like, all right, now we need an agent. So I bring in this gentleman by the name of Michael Arfin. He's over at AGI still. And, you know, and when I sent them the mixes, it wasn't even a finished record. He's like, not only do I love this, I got a tour for you next month. And remember, we're not even now we're in like May. We're just finishing, we're doing the mixes of the record, or we're just in the middle of the mixes. And now I'm like, end of May, and I'm like, oh, guess what, guys? You're going on the road in July. They're like, what? I'm like, yep, welcome to the world of music.
But I think it's a testament to what you're saying, that having, a supporter, what's the word that we were using earlier? A champion, that it's so crucial. And you guys had, one with the catalyst of Jeff Blue, then it went to you, and then, so on and so forth.
Right. And again, it goes back to that whole thing. Especially when you've done it a while, right? Experience does matter. Having a group of people that you've known for time and time again, Jeff and I had known each other casually through it, but he heard about this guy that worked with Andy Gould, and you should check out this kid who I was managing this band Static X, and I'd just taken it to a platinum record, on my own, from the clubs to up, so everyone was, so Warner people liked me. The Warner people actually liked, at least I think they liked dealing with me. I'm sure if you asked them quietly, they probably hated me as a manager. But we had a great relationship with the right people. And again, it takes so many people. I don't care what anyone says. Any artist can say they did it themselves, but there were so many people behind them moving those pieces. And back then, you had physical distribution. So then you had a whole nother monster. And then this makes it even crazier. So the song gains traction. Radio guys want it. It starts taking on a life of its own. Now we're in August, right? We're in July or August. We had just been we're out with this young band called the Union Underground. It was one of Columbia Records' big, they were pushing that new metal band, and we were opening, but we were doing a great job playing with them, and people were seeing us and talking about us. And so the heat was getting so much that Phil Carrera, who was president of Warner's at the time, I give Phil all the credit for this. Phil, as president of Warner's, pulled the trigger on Linkin Park. He was the man. And he really just said, you know what, this has to come out like October. And remember, we're in August. And our original goal was all right, let's put out like a couple of songs, let's build this band and put out a record in next February. And we were all set for that, right? That was our original thought process. And all of a sudden now on a dime, it flipped. And I'm like, I don't even have album art. I don't have anything. And so, it just took on a life of its own. So the good news is that all the work that I'd learned, everything I'd learned up to that point, it's that type of thing, right, that you kind of hear about. All that work I had done, everything that Andy had shown me, everything I'd worked on his projects, my own projects I was starting to take on and do well with, everything up to that point clicked in because there was no stopping. It was just, it was going.
Yeah, it's like the famous quote of Winston Churchill, to each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing unique to them and their and their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. And I think that's obviously what you're touching on there.
Yeah, and I was very, I was very happy to have been that prepared up to that point, because you never know.
Right.
But when it went, and again, to have a great group of people, I can't stop talking about that, and I've been saying it ever since. I'm one of those rare managers that never beat up record labels. I was always like, how did I could have never put the band in 60 countries by myself.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure I could have. It just would have not really worked the way it should have.
Interesting. Yeah.
So all of a sudden the thing just took on a life of its own, and it went off. It was amazing. It was kind of one of those fun things where you just kind of got excited, but you didn't want to get too excited because you just had so much work to do. So we just all kind of hunkered down and said, all right, what's next? Okay. And the band, it was really nice having a band like that who got it, but didn't know but had to learn at the same time. So yeah, because they listened. They were actually really good partners in terms of listening to what they didn't know and then saying, but we want to do this, but we want to do that. And then us being able to kind of shift it and pivot it to where it needed to fit what they wanted.
Yeah, I really respect them because I thought, or at least the way they projected themselves, they were incredibly savvy and they definitely had a vision of where they wanted to go, always.
Yeah. They didn't know everything they wanted to do. They just knew that as it was kind of getting there, like, how do we do this? What about if we wanted to do this? And that was the relationship, for almost the entire time I worked with them. It was really a lot of, I'd come back with, I'd come back with 20 ideas. They'd give me another 10, and then we'd figure out the 5, 6, 7 that really worked.
Rob, could you speak about the distinctions between breaking a pop act, a rock band, and urban act, and what has to be present for you to sign it?
You know what? I probably couldn't. I wish I I could tell you my kind of gut on it, and what you really need to see and not see. But, I want more pop acts in my life. I want to learn that stuff. I've been doing this 25 years, 26 years, and I want to learn more. Right. I'm young. I still have a lot to learn. And so for me, I think that no matter what it is, no matter what genre it is, no matter there's just this piece to it that everyone just understands, that when it starts getting going and you find a lot of people to get in there, it just goes.
Yeah, it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a lot, again, a lot of work inside of it. But I'm saying when something has it, like most people who do what, if they're pop guys for a living, if they're hip hop guys for a living, they do all that. They know, they can hear something and they go, oh, we got something here. And by the way, there are a few times where it doesn't work, right? Because music is such a, it's so interesting that we move it on such a big level for something that's kind of can be so personal to people. The fact that we have to really, it's per person, that you're kind of going out to. And if you have a big song, and I believe that the pop music is better now than it's been in a long time, just as someone that's watching it from afar and trying to, everyone would always love a pop artist. I don't care what manager you are. I don't think you'd turn down having a big pop artist. So
interesting. Well, I mean, that goes right to the heart of where we're at today, because, pop music, as you said, is so big today. And I'm curious, from your perspective, Rob, has streaming and the discovery process today changed the way that you reach the audience and market to it?
Yes. It's made it harder and easier at the same time, right? When the audience knows what they want and they go to these playlists, and I learn so much on playlists now, and I think streaming, I have a what I think is a deep, nice size album collection. It's not huge by any span of the imagination, but streaming, I'm learning everything all the time. I'm always on it. I'm always digging through and going, oh, what's this? Oh, I'd never really spend time on the Madonna singles before, but now I listen to them. You know what I mean? Like, I would never spend time on any of these things, but I want to become a better music person. And so I spend my time on it. But I'm still inside of the rock this and the new noise playlists off Spotify, and I dig through a few playlists off Apple Music and Amazon, just so I can kind of dig into these things, because I just think that you have to keep learning. But to go back to what you're saying, I think it makes it harder because there's so much more, and anyone can get into those systems, so to speak. And if it's good and if people like it, you get on those playlists. But you also can target people better. And if you have a good group of people that is a solid group, you can get to them and solidly keep on them. And they're going to keep coming back to that spot and coming back to that spot. Like anyone would know that someone like me would be on, or a hard rock person, if they really get it, they'd be on the rock hard playlist on Spotify. So they know that you have at least how many hundreds of thousands of people you can rely on. Well, at least you get a little bit of ears on that if you're within the top 20 songs or 30 songs on that list, and even further, because people just kind of let them go.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you're enjoying our featured interview. Before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. So, hey, Rich, tell me a little bit about the Music Business Registry.
Well, what we are, Music Business Registry is the leading contact directory. We publish all of the most current, accurate, and up-to-date contact information for the music industry. We do directories for A&R. We do directories for music publishers. We do directories for film and television music. We do directories of artist managers, and we do directories of music attorneys. And we also sell other publications too, like the Indie Bible Series, the YouTube Bible Series, the Indie Spotify Bible Series, and other things as well. That's what we're about.
So if I wanted to find out, let's say, the music supervisor for American Horror Story, I can kind of go into the Film and TV monthly and find the information that I need there?
Well, we don't list specific shows. What we do list is if you know who the music supervisor is, and you can find that out on IMDb, then you can find their contact information. And we have that in our Film and Television Music Monthly. Absolutely, yes.
That's great. And I hear that we have a discount right now. If you go to musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first order.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we offer that to all of the MUBUTV insiders.
So insiders, check out musicregistry.com and use MUBUTV10 as your coupon code. Rob, can you talk about the importance of colleges and festivals in terms of building an artist's life career?
Oh, I used to love, I mean, listen, colleges for me used to be, it used to be the only way you wanted to do it, right? I was a college radio guy back in the early 90s. And, now I actually believe that there still is a way that, they still have money for programming, and there's still ways to do it. I love colleges, to me, are the best way to still kind of find a group of people to champion your music. Because I think that the group of music that you like as a teenager, when you start hitting 18, 19, you actually then start liking a little bit different group of music. And that's where I think college comes in. By the time I was 18, 19, 20, that's when the Pearl Jams and Rage Against the Machines and the Soundgardens and all that were starting to take over. While before that, I was a little bit of a heavier kid, Metallica and all that stuff, and, punk rock kid, skateboarding.
What do you see based on that? I mean, when you talk about the colleges and you talk about, that the festival circuit and so forth, expanding on that point that Eric was bringing up, what do you see as some of the new and emerging markets opening up on the international front today for artists?
I mean, I just think that because you can reach everything, it can come from anywhere. I just picked up a hard rock band from Delhi, India.
Oh, okay. Wow.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So of all names, they have a funny name. They're called Bloodywood. They've been doing stuff online, but they're, it's kind of like, I'll call it new metal-y or metal like that, and with some Indian kind of folk rhythms in it. And so you can now discover those things. Those things show up in the hard rock metal world. There's a Mongolian metal band called The Who, HU, right? That's starting to get a lot of traction, a couple millions of views. So, I mean, these things would have been squashed by the local systems or brought out that way. I mean, when I was first working in Linkin Park, we spent a lot of time trying to build out China, and we did successfully. But it took a long time, and it took, a couple of champions inside the country, inside of China to kind of help us. It started with Hybrid Theory, but we didn't get there until the third record, but it built up, the stuff like that. So you can imagine how hard it was even 15, 20 years ago that people didn't want to bring stuff out. Now you've got K-pop coming over. I knew I was lucky because I always go to a music conference called Music Matters, All That Matters. It's now in Singapore every year, and it's been there for a while. But I go there, but it's been one of those things that, like, all the K-pop people I've been meeting for the last 10 years, and I'm so excited that I see all of them now starting to bring all their music over here.
And it breaking, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's working. Well, because listen, America's great that way, right? Because there's communities of everything. If you just got to tap into the community, you can find these artists that have that base, and then you can hopefully cross them over to pop. The K-pop stuff's been great because the pop community has been really into it over here.
Oh, completely, yeah. Absolutely.
Rob, as an artist manager, it seems almost inevitable that you'll work with that client forever. I know it must be heartbreaking losing an artist, especially, one that you've had a long-term relationship with. How do you deal with this? And does it make you cynical when it happens several times to you?
You're talking about end of the working relationship with an artist?
Yes.
Because there's a different way to lose an artist too. That I've been through also. You do. You go through every layer of it. I can only think about, obviously I've worked and not worked and moved on from different acts, myself doing it or them doing it. And, you go through, you have a little resentment for a while. You kind of get really kind of bummed out by it because you've done everything, or at least you think in your mind, everyone's done everything, right? That you could do. And sometimes people just make those decisions, and you have to just, like anything else, you're almost kind of now managing yourself, right? You're just like, hey, dude, just pick yourself up. Perseverance is king. I stopped working with Linkin in the end of 2010, officially. And from the last, it took me a couple of years, and you always want to kind of prove it that you're better than that, but you go through it, right? Anyone goes through it. And any manager that doesn't go through it, I kind of worry about. You should have a little resentment. You should be a little upset. You should be second guessing yourself. That's just natural things. But then you just got to move on. Perseverance, And I have good relationships with those guys. I don't see them much. I see them every year or so. Everyone, but I don't have any. There's no negativity in that world. It just kind of happens that way. In fact, what usually happens to me, which makes me feel good as a manager, is I actually get thanked years later, which is a rare thing because you never get thanked when you're actually managing them.
I guess people have perspective and reflect more and go, wow, maybe,
Yeah. So it's unexpected, but nice when it happened the first couple of times.
Are there specific qualities that make a great manager?
I mean, yeah, of course there are. No, that's not what I'm supposed to say, right?
Well, no, I mean, what do you think they are, if there are?
No, I'm just teasing. I think you have to be organized. Which every once in a while, like any good, if you have too many artists, you can fall into a disorganizational trap sometimes. You have to be organized. You have to really be level-headed. I think that, if you cause more drama than the situation that you're in as a manager, that's not a good sign, and there's been a lot of managers that unfortunately do that and still survive. I think because someone has to be the adult in charge at all times, no matter what it is, right? That's what a manager is. No matter what kind of scenario, no matter what BS comes across your plate, somebody has to ultimately be the one in charge. And if you're the one losing your cool, then the rest of the scenario is going to get worse. So I like to always, I like to pride myself on being pretty level-headed. I have a lot of artists that when something's going wrong, they're like, why aren't you kind of like, I go, because I've been through every bad scenario that can probably happen to an artist. And, I can solve this. I'll tell you how long it takes me to do it, or if you want to even go through it. I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it now. So organization, level-headedness, and just this innate intuitive nature that kind of have this, I call it a cognitive thought process, right? Not just solving the problem, but being able to game out the next 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead of everyone else. And I think there are a lot of managers that actually have that. I think there are a lot of managers that may not have that, but I think there are a lot more managers. The successful managers are able to really see and game things out.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like playing chess. You got to think 10 moves ahead. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Do you think we've redefined what success is in this new era?
Yeah, well, I think success has kind of always been there. I think that the success has been opened up to more people. Right. I think that there used to be a certain level, dictated by the plaques on the wall, but I think that a lot more artists are defining what success is. Right. They can still have, 1 million paying fans and super fans, and they're, making millions on the road, and yet they've never had a label, or they're streaming in the billions, and they've never had anything more than a distribution setup, So I think that where success used to really be this kind of all elusive top of the pile, I think it's opened it up to a lot more people. I think there's a middle tier that actually got wiped out when we were in a changeover a few years ago. It was like top or bottom, that I think now there's a middle tier that's coming through where people can make really good money once we truly harness all the streaming. And I think that's a whole new level of success that people are going to be attaining.
Are there any great books that you can recommend to music artists that you feel they should be reading?
I'll tell you something that's really, yeah. I mean, I follow, again, just to kind of keep up on it, I'll follow, Music Business Worldwide or Digital Music News, and just, Billboard, and just kind of stay on top of what everyone's saying and talking. I check out everything that, when you send out your newsletter, how to score, I'm always kind of like checking it out, and, because you just got to stay on top of it. I was very interested. I recently started working with an artist, a duo called Icon for Hire, and the woman in the band, a woman named Ariel, who really is a champion of like the young women when they're going through their time. She wrote a book called Turn Your Pain into Art, which I think is really good for young artists. It tells her story. And she tells it, she's a female, so it comes from that perspective for a lot of females. But it's a really interesting read in terms of how artists can really harness what they're going through and turn it into great art, and it's really kind of cool stuff like that really intrigued me. And when I first was talking with them, they're a band that's been around a little while. And I got intrigued by that fact, because I think we need a lot more people to help everyone through this scenario. I think because it's so cloudy with, technology's been so great, and then it makes everything so cloudy at the same time, right? Everyone's going for the dopamine hit of a post, and everyone's trying to figure all this out. And I think it's also kind of making people more manic and depressed at the same time. So we're trying to figure our way through it, right? So, when you're an artist and you're trying to, why hasn't anyone, you're getting depressed because, you've gotten 5 likes on something that you posted. and you're not getting the hit that you want out of it, you've got to try and figure out how to get through that. So I think there should be actually, I'll word it a little differently. I think there should be more books on how we get through this process and turn that into great art versus just the standard. This is what you get paid royalty wise. This is what, because you need that, right? We all have that, but those books are already written and they're just updated as we go.
Precisely. I want to ask it from another side, because a lot of our audience, Rob, are people that want to get into the business. They're music business professionals. So from your point of view, can you give us like the top 3 things that you think a person should consider before embarking on a career as an artist manager? What kind of qualities, or what are the things that you think are the most important if somebody wants to be an artist manager?
Patience, a good liver. Sorry.
Inside joke.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No. Listen, there's a lot of activity when you're out doing, when you're out. There's a lot. I tell young people that want to get into business, I always tell them that when you first get into business, you'll probably get meeting the most people that you'll end up knowing the next 20 or 30 years. You'll get to know and meet those people somewhere between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. most of the time, And that's what it's about, right? You've got to be sociable. You've got to be able to build relationships. That's by the way, that's probably number 1, right? If you're a shy person, it's definitely going to be hard for you until you overcome that. Because I know I had a little bit of that. I was a very quiet person when I first got into the industry, but just buckled down and did the work. Wasn't asked for my opinion, given my opinion until I was asked for it. But I really kind of overcame that because I had ideas that I saw were working over time. And I thought different ways of getting artist fans excited, and just really patience. Because it's really hard. You're not going to get, if you go to college for this and you come out and you get into it, you're going to have to do the internship. You're going to have to do the work to get there. You're going to want to just be that person that's sitting there going, what can I do next? What can I help you with? Because that's how you learn. I went out, and when I was in college, I was running my college radio station, like 70, 80 hours of hard rock metal programming. Then I actually was working I went to school on Long Island, a place called CW Post. And they had a performing arts center called the Int'l Center. And it was a 2,500 seat hall. And they had student crew. So I do I do my classes on Tuesday, Thursday. I'd intern at Concrete. And then I was an assistant at Concrete Management for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I would do 20 hours of stage crew, and I'd still do all of my programming for the radio station, and still go out and hang out and meet all these people in New York. You
were immersed in it as a way of life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, by the way, it's not a job. I mean, I hope you probably had enough people on who have kind of said that. Like this isn't a job. This is a lifestyle. You have to try and fit life inside of this lifestyle if you want to have a life outside of it.
No, absolutely. It's got to become a way of life. If it's to be your career, I've never heard any successful manager say otherwise, ever.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, and I'm jealous. I don't have children, but I love watching my manager friends that have kids and how they kind of balance it and how successful they still are when doing that. Because of course it can be done. Right?
Of course it can. It's just, it takes a lot of work.
You just have to figure out how it fits the lifestyle. Right. You have to figure out how it fits the lifestyle and how nothing kind of changes.
For our audience, how do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you?
You know what? I don't, I will always say this. I'm sometimes slow on the uptake in terms of getting back to people, but don't worry. I see it. And usually if it's non-rushed business, I'll get to it on a weekend, but you can just hit me at rob@madmacent.com. I have no problem with that. People hit me up at my email address.
I want to ask, what are the strongest pieces of advice you would have for our listeners who want to be artists, who want to pursue a career in this business as recording artists?
Don't give up. Keep going. Listen, if you find some good people, again, outside of your circle of family and close friends that can give you true advice, and you can understand the good and the bad, because if they're only telling you good advice, you've got a problem, right? You're always not doing something right early on. So you want to be able to have someone that can tell you that too. And you really just have to keep finding that outlet. It's so much easier to find the information now and to play around with different sources of people. And you really have to get out there and get to know the first 50 people in every market by name. So if you're a young artist and you live in, if you live in New York and or let's say, or LA, right? You should be already, and you form a band and you're starting to play. You should be trying to find other bands and people that you can relate to in the one-day drive around you, all those cities, right? Anything that's a one-day drive, you should be able to go and play shows every weekend. And if you're not playing shows every weekend, and doing your social media during the week, then you're probably already behind.
Rob, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Anytime. Well, the artist-manager relationship, artist-manager and artist, what an interesting take on it that was. I mean, I love Rob. I think he's a great guy. He's obviously had extensive experience with giant artists, whether, Linkin Park or so many others that he's worked with over the years. A lot of wisdom there. A lot of wisdom in that interview.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that he talked about that success or the artist-manager relationship hasn't really changed. That I guess that what's changed is that you're more in it together, as opposed to having that big, large team, the record label and all that stuff. The manager is more entrenched into the relationship with the artist.
And we've spoken about that before in previous podcasts where we speak about what you just said about all of those systems that were in place to support the artist.
Don't exist.
They don't exist anymore. So it's much more now that the artist and the manager are in it together.
Yes.
And that they have to work together because precisely for that reason. So, and that's especially true at the beginning of a career. But, also, and it could be a very big manager.
Right.
Who has to take on a brand new client. Those kinds of things I think are very, very important. And they're important distinctions to understand today versus previous eras.
Yeah, and I thought the other great point that he brought up is, when we asked about when does an artist need a manager, which is such a crucial, I think, point. And, he said that it was different for each. He thought that, I guess his threshold, and everybody's different, that he felt that it was very important to have at least an audience of some sort. He kind of placed it at 20,000
of something,
having a base that you can work off of, which I think it's true to a certain extent. You've got to have something there. And I think it's got to be on being from the family or people close to you. He was talking about that if it's beyond the people that are, going to be telling you everything is great, your mom, your dad, your aunt and uncle, but that are, if you're getting that feedback from the audience that doesn't know who you are, then you've got something to build on.
Exactly. And he used the figure of 20,000 and he justified that by saying in his experience, if you don't have 20,000 of something, then there are more fundamental problems that need to be looked at within the nature of your
whether
work.
It's communicating as an artist or the songs are not there, the material's not resonating. Yeah.
Because he has pointed out later in the interview, he points out that a lot of people have very big successes without having hit songs, but when you have a career, that's an important thing. So some kind of base, and using an audience, or again, we go back to that previous episodes have talked about, I know one that we did with Ariel Hyatt, where she spoke about, that it's really important that you have an audience that wants what you're offering, that wants what you are giving as an artist, that you are connecting with them. And I think even, our interview with Michael Alago talked about that as well.
I think there's a running theme there that it has to connect on some level, viscerally or...
Exactly. And it's an important point because, a manager can't give that to you.
Right.
People think, if I'm with so-and-so who manages Metallica, or if I'm with, Irving Azoff, or I'm with, they'll get me an audience.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
They'll give it to me.
One of the other things that I thought too was, when we asked him about what qualities that make a great manager. And I thought it was interesting, and it's true. Being organized was a big one that he was harping on.
Yeah.
And also being level-headed.
Very important.
Especially, in the world that he was living in with Linkin Park and all that, trying to keep things together. And I guess through his experiences, he was commenting that some of the bands fans were like saying, my God, why wouldn't you be freaking out about this? And he said, because I've been in every conceivable situation you can possibly imagine, and I've already been through this, so I already know how to kind of handle that. So I think that's a great quality, somebody that can have composure and have poise.
Absolutely. And, it's called being the adult in the situation.
Right, as he mentioned. Yeah, exactly.
I think he even said that. Yeah, he said that in his answer. Being the adult in the situation. And the other thing that he talked about, which was so important for great managers, I think he qualified this, is that they are strategic in their thinking, that they can think ahead, 3-4 steps ahead. I mean, people have often talked about that, with David Geffen had that quality. Right. Irving Azoff has that quality where they can think 3-4 steps ahead for their client. Yeah, which is a really important factor.
It's like when I mentioned it's like playing chess. You have to think those 10 moves ahead with everything. So he talked about gaming things out, which I think is an interesting kind of point, because you are thinking strategically and tactically, how are you going to get that artist from point A to point B?
And then I remember an interview I did with Miles Copeland at UCLA, and he talked about that very quality of, as a manager, he always called it the then what. Okay, we've gotten the top 10 hit. The now what?
Right.
Now what?
Now
what? Okay, all right, we finished the tour. All right, now what? Like, there's always the next step. There's always the strategic thing of thinking beyond, not just lying back and gloating in your success, but now what?
Right.
What's next? Is it another album? Is it a tour? Is it a brand? Is it what are the next steps? I mean, he was the first one to ever clue me into that. Right. That thing of the now what, but never ever resting on your
laurels. And you have to keep moving. You have to keep moving it forward. You have to keep the ship moving.
That's right. Very, very important for a manager in terms of that thinking.
The other one that I really thought was good was when we asked about redefining success in this new era. And I thought that one of the points that he brought up that was interesting was that success has been opened up to more people.
Very much so.
Than before.
And we've talked about this on this show in the past where, we are in an era where more and more people are having success who we all have never heard of.
That they're not household names.
They're not household names, but they are making viable livings. Some are making incredible livings.
Right.
I remember Bob Lefsetz wrote about this guy, Jimmy Smith. I mean, it's not a made-up name. He's a real artist who made $2 million. And I was like, who is... And he wrote about him and how did he do it? How he built this following across the country for years to the point where he could make that kind of money. And no one's ever heard of him. But I say no one, but that's relative today. Right. One of my things, Eric, and I always say this, and I've said this probably on the show many, many times, the most valuable commodity in the world today, especially in marketing, is the ability to get people's attention.
Right.
Why is that the most valuable commodity? Because it's the hardest thing to do.
Yep.
And I always say, if you don't believe me, which is fine, you don't have to believe me. You just have to look at your own life and look at, from the moment your eyes open in the morning until they shut at night, how many times is a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a parent, a mother, a father, a boss, a sister, a brother, a website, an email, a text message,
that's
something,
trying to fight for your attention.
And how many do you give it to, and for how long?
Exactly.
And now put, hey, listen to my song. Hey, check my album out. Hey, come to my show. And you begin to see how valuable that is. And by the way, that's not a quality that money, power, or market share, or size can rectify.
Yep.
It cannot.
It cannot.
Disney can spend 9 figures in the hundreds of millions on a movie.
Look at The Lone Ranger. Perfect example.
And people went, so what?
Yeah, so I think the bottom line here is the great point was that he said that artists are redefining success.
Yes, and that we, not only are they redefining success, but out of that redefinition, we are developing a new middle class of artists.
Right. He talked about that middle tier.
Absolutely. And that's very, very, very important for today.
Hey Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show over at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome, welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes in our space. You can also find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Insider Video Series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. This show would not be here if it weren't for our amazing team, which are the following: interview editors Sarah Nissenbaum and Alex Taylor. Show notes and transcriptions by Jani Chang, Nicole Capodoglo, Lilia Owens, and Sarah Nissenbaum. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast.